Welcome back to In Touch with me, Jadia Japie-Emmanuel. My guest this evening is Mrs. Tracy Polius, and she's a permanent secretary in the Ministry of Planning and National Development. We have been speaking about the role of the ministry and focused a little while ago on one of the projects recently unveiled, and that is the Dennery redevelopment. What a redevelopment project. Now, I say Dennery, but I need to amend that to say Dennery and Vieux Fort, because the permanent secretary did advise us that Vieux Fort is at an advanced stage, and I believe this is good news for our viewers in the south. Now, you may have noticed that our WhatsApp number and our BBM pin has changed. This is because my phone has changed. I think I shared with you last week that I had issues with my phone, and so you would have to send your WhatsApp messages to 7204992, and the BBM pin is on the screen as well. Later on in the program, we'll be taking your telephone calls as usual, and so if you have comments or questions that you may want to ask, matters that may not be totally clear based on our discussion, or you may want to have you may have questions that are totally outside of what we have discussed but relevant to our topic of discussion and my guests as well, you can feel free to call in to do so later on. The Shock Bay Grosley Road and secondary roads improvement projects, that was launched, or may I say there was a signing ceremony between the government of St. Lucia and the Kuwait Fund. They are no strangers to St. Lucia. There is a history and a relationship between the government of St. Lucia and the Kuwait Fund for Arab Development. In fact, this very project would have been their project, shared between the government of St. Lucia and the Kuwait Fund. So I don't think many persons would have been surprised when that ceremony took place and the government of St. Lucia announced that we would be commencing work for the extension of that road. Sometime last year, the Prime Minister's office announced that there was a mission from Kuwait, and they came in to do a feasibility study. The Prime Minister did announce very early, I believe it would have been his first or second budget, that he intended to deal with some of the remaining issues on that road, the congestion and so on, and to make the road safer by extending all the way up to Grosley. I believe you would have heard the discussion subsequent to the signing ceremony, but even before we go into that, I want to speak to the project itself, the relationship between St. Lucia and Kuwait. How difficult was it for your ministry in terms of, re-engaging them and getting them interested and committed to getting this project off the ground?
Well, as you said, Shadia, this project is really phase 2 of the initial project where we rehabilitated from VG to Shock, which was Castries to Grosley phase 1. Mm-hmm. And so that first project, that initial stage, was financed by the Kuwaiti Fund for Arab Economic Development. So they've engaged with us before, and so I believe it was not a surprise to them that we sought to try to extend this time and redo the second phase of the project. In fact, I should say that Castries to Grosley was initially conceptualized as one project, a single project. Mm-hmm. With interchanges. It was quite an expensive undertaking because the designs were a lot more complex than what currently obtains, with mm-hmm. interchanges and pedestrian overheads and all of that. And at the time, the government felt it was going to be too much of a costly exercise in terms of the impact on the fiscal and cash flow and all of that. So what we did is that we decided to phase the project, and that was way back in 2006 when that project started in preparation for Cricket World Cup 2007. I think people would remember that, even though the first phase ended after Cricket World Cup. Yeah. So that was the genesis of the project. It was a single project, but given the cost, the government took a decision to phase the project. So this is now phase 2. And we re-engaged the Kuwaitis and sought financing for the balance of the project, which is looking at rehabilitation from Shock Bay to Grosley Village Junction.
You still refer to Grizzly as a village. I think some people would be very offended and would tell you that it's town. So please, please, I'm not looking for any trouble with the parliamentary representative for Grizzly. And I can imagine just in a little while I'll be getting a message about that. But you spoke about it being a costly undertaking when it was conceptualized as one project. And from attending the ceremony last week, the signing ceremony, even though we are speaking about phase 2, in my mind it is still a very costly undertaking. And whereas the Kuwait Fund for Arab Development has pledged an amount and will be working with us to provide both financing and technical assistance, there is still a balance that would remain, and that your ministry would have to seek financing for, or seek to engage other donors. I don't know if the government of St. Lucia would be responsible for that.
Actually, the project, yes, is an expensive undertaking, very expensive. The total project cost is somewhere around 150 million EC. So the Kuwaiti Fund for Arab Economic Development is financing about 11.9 million, which is approximately 30 million EC. And we also have the OPEC Fund for International Development, OFID. They are co-financing the project with the Kuwaiti Fund for Arab Economic Development, and they are financing about 18 million US, which is approximately 18 million US, which is so the total financing from the Kuwaiti Fund and OFID is approximately 80 million EC, just around 81 million EC.
Okay.
And there is a balance that's to be financed that we are currently working on. We're working on the fine details of that, and we can't really speak about who the actual financing agency for that balance is going to be, but we are working assiduously on that aspect of it.
Understood. The financing arrangement between OFID, Kuwaitis and St. Lucia, would it be, is it grant funding, is it loan funding?
It's loan funding.
It's loan funding. Okay, indeed. I want to speak to the project itself and the project components, because I have noted that this project, unlike the projects we discussed earlier, which has to do with redevelopment of the water supply, this project, and particularly for those who have memories of the first phase of this project, many are welcoming the project, but they are doing so very cautiously because they already understand that there would be some adjustments, and for many there would be some inconveniences as well. And so it will impact a number of individuals, citizens, and the business community alike. In preparation for this particular project, and that is, I'm speaking about the road itself between Shock and Grozely, how are we preparing to accommodate diversion of traffic and some of the adjustments that will be necessary as we move ahead to implement this project?
I think the concerns of the public are valid. It is going to be a very major undertaking.
Yes.
Widening. We're looking at the widening of the existing carriageway from a two-lane road to two-way road. So we're going to have 2 northern-bound lanes and 2 southern-bound lanes from Shock to Grozely. We're looking at upgrading of 7 major junctions, pavement strengthening and construction of pedestrian walkways, safety bars, footsteps. We're also looking at construction of 10 overhead footbridges at Marisol, Glass, Eastwinds, 2 at Bois d'Orge, Moshi, Rodney Bay, Bonte, Grozely, and Wyndham, right? And also upgraded of drainage infrastructure and ancillary structures. So it's quite a major undertaking. And therefore, to be able to relieve the pain of commuters and drivers, the government thought that that we should also explore the opportunity to upgrade the secondary roads, and this should be done in terms of sequencing first, so that it would allow for when works are being undertaken on the major highway, that people have the option of using the
The back roads, as we call them.
as we
Yeah.
call them. And there are a number of secondary roads that are
Some
due to
of
be
them I need to
rehabilitated.
learn, because when I saw all of these roads, I said to myself, my gosh, JJ, you need to explore the north a little bit more. A lot of roads, secondary roads, to be rehabilitated. And I would imagine, because the volume of traffic, if I recall, and it is stated somewhere here in this document, that this road has the highest traffic movement in St. Lucia on a daily basis. And so, but I still am not convinced that the inconvenience would be less than it currently is to suffer the traffic congestion, as we like to say, at certain points, especially the bottleneck areas. But take us through the secondary roads to be rehabilitated. I know it is a lot, but I think I want our viewers to get a sense as to where exactly we will be tackling, so that we can have a diversion of traffic off of the main road as we work on the extension.
Well, the traffic count, it's in terms of appraisal for the project, we had to ensure that there's a positive return on the project. So in terms of looking at the dynamics in terms of traffic, it's approximately 27,000 motor vehicles per day. That's the average, average daily traffic. So it's very significant on that road. And so therefore, we anticipate there'll be bottlenecks if you're working on that road, and people are traversing the road at the same time. So in terms of the secondary roads to be rehabilitated, we're looking at the Beauséjour-Bella Rosa Road. We're looking at Bella Rosa Bonte to Bonte Moshi, Bonte Moshi to Moshi Vesikwi, Moshi Vesikwi to Norbec Corinth, Bella Rosa. We're also looking at Union Grand Riviere to Shock Roundabout, that very popular one. And Union Grand Riviere to Grand Riviere Bridge. I'm sure you're aware of that one as well. And the Corinth Marisil to Norbec Corinth. You should be aware of that one too. Corinth Bois-de-Ouange to Norbec Corinth, and Moshi Bois-de-Ouange to Moshi Vesikwi. The Aquatic Center to Moshi Road.
There's a road there?
Yes. Yeah, there is a road.
I have some work to do. It's okay.
And there's the Bonte Access Road, which is near the bridge as well, near the Bonte Bridge. And then there is Catherine's Grocery Marina, near the arena, to Bella Rosa and Bonte. I'm not sure that I know where this one is.
But would it mean that I would like to believe that in the appraisal period, and as you did your assessment and your feasibility work for this project, that we would have a sense as to you know, how many secondary roads or how much work needs to be done to accommodate all of the traffic, because whereas there are some persons who can exercise the option as to whether to go or not to go, there are many persons who must go, whether it be for work, for school, and so on. So are we to say that the rehabilitation of these secondary roads would be able to accommodate the normal flow of traffic, well, with inconveniences as well, but the normal flow, daily flow of traffic in that area?
Well, there will be some inconvenience in the sense that
I can sense
if you're working on this major thoroughfare, you would expect that there will be some inconveniences, because there are distances where people may not have to use, may not be able to use a secondary road or a back road, as we say. But the whole idea is to phase the project and to sequence it in such a manner that you allow for minimum interruption. So what we hope would happen is that you would rehabilitate those secondary roads, and that while these are being done, you'd also, we hope that we can time the project implementations. And we had a discussion with the Ministry of Infrastructure just last week, so that you have the Shock Bridge being rehabilitated around the same time. And what the plan in terms of implementation, certainly from what we've discussed with the Ministry of Implementation and what the Ministry of Infrastructure hopes to do, is to look at the junction improvements first, because this is where we tend to have the most issues in terms of traffic congestions,
Yeah.
because of pedestrian and motor vehicular
Or because
conflict.
the traffic lights are not working, like in the Corinth junction.
In some cases, yeah, but in
Yeah.
some cases you have a lot of pedestrian motor vehicle conflict.
Mhm.
So if we could, if those junction improvements could be addressed first,
Mhm.
and then thereafter we look at the pedestrian walkways, then we hope that that sequencing will sort of alleviate the problems, because once the junctions are improved, so you would have a freer flow of traffic, and then you could address some of the broader issues with the road. So we hope that if you sequence the implementation, that you would minimize the inconvenience to the traveling public. Not that there will be no inconvenience, but it would be less than if it's not sequenced.
And I think if we know better is coming, or we know that it is for the greater good, I think many persons would be able to tolerate, or would make that sacrifice to go through it. I think it is more of a hassle and a headache if you are forced to divert and you have no idea why or what is happening, and this brings the whole question of public awareness and public engagement. This one for sure would require a lot of public awareness, a lot of public engagement, and road safety would matter, especially for persons who are not too familiar with the back roads, as we call them. Or I would assume too that there are instances where people will be using the main carriageway as work would be happening at different points.
Yes.
And so the Ministry of Infrastructure would be responsible for sensitizing the people and engaging them.
Yes, they would be.
Okay.
But we would help if required. There will be, I must say, a project management unit for that project within the Ministry of Infrastructure.
Okay.
Port Services and Transport, solely responsible for implementation of that project. So, in other words, the capacity would be there to support implementation of that project within the Ministry of Infrastructure.
Where are we in terms of the implementation of this project?
We've just done the signing of the loan agreement. In terms of parliamentary resolution, this has just moved through the upper and lower houses just last week. So we now working with the Ministry of Infrastructure in terms of development, in terms of establishment of the project management unit. And once that has been done, then the project, we would look at the recruitment of a consultant who would be responsible for designs for the main highway, the designs for the main highway.
Do we have timelines for the actual commencement of this project, or we just, as one phase is complete, then we move into the next? Or do we have targets?
There are some timelines, but they're at this point not very
concrete.
Very concrete.
Okay.
At this point in time. We hope that by the end of this year we could start seeing some work on the secondary roads.
Ken, in terms of other aspects of this project, you spoke earlier to the whole issue of adaptability, climate adaptability and so on. We have noticed, and I think we can use our experience from the first phase of that project, there are some areas that may not necessarily be as others, and we can think of a number of areas along that carriageway where once it rains excessively, then there is cause for concern. We begin to wonder whether we are able to cross the Shock Bridge, for example, or whether there is flooding in some other areas. Is this project happening within the context of dealing with this problem simultaneously, or would this be a separate endeavor altogether?
Well, the Ministry of Infrastructure, as we speak, is one of the things that we want to do in terms of investments for the country is the whole concept of building better. So hopefully the components of this project are going to be implemented to disaster resilience standards. And so one of the main areas, for instance, you just mentioned the Shock Bridge. The Shock Bridge is going to be implemented under the Disaster Vulnerability Risk Reduction Project, although it's going to be a major interface for this project, so timing and sequencing is going to be important. And that bridge has been designed to, is being designed to disaster resilience standards. In other words, to withstand events that may be of the magnitude of 1 in a 100-year events.
Understood. A question that is just coming to me, in fact, you answered one of them already, and this person was asking about the shock bridge, because I believe that this bridge has gone out to tender, according to what she's saying. In fact, she was asking, I wanted to ask the PS the progress of the tenders for shock bridge, given the highway extension upcoming, would the bridge be constructed during that time?
It would be, but the project shock bridge has not gone out to tender. Right now, we're in the process of doing a design review for shock bridge. Okay. So shock bridge has been designed, and we doing a design review to facilitate preparing the tender documents for shock. So we are a little way off for tendering shock bridge.
Some individuals are asking as well whether there will be any review of the existing phase 1, basically of that Castries to Grosley road. Probably time and hindsight would have given us an opportunity to review some of the issues. For me, I believe the greatest issue there is proper use of the road. I note that we have had a lot of fender benders and little bump and scrapes on that road, and I think it has a lot to do with use of the road, proper use of the road, our patience as drivers. I probably am guilty of being impatient sometimes on the road, but clearly there is a lot more that we need to do in terms of road safety and ensuring that our drivers are very conscious and that we drive not for ourselves, but for other road users as well. But in terms of the design, in terms of making adjustments to ensure that there is a better flow of traffic and so on, we expecting to see any changes, or will this project simply be commencing from that shock junction right there, taking us all the way up, and anything else that has to be reviewed would have to be a separate undertaking by the relevant ministries?
No, certainly I think the Ministry of Infrastructure has the capacity to review, and in terms of appraisal for that project, they would have done an assessment of what are some of the things that went wrong during implementation of phase 1 and what are some of the issues they need to address on phase 1. So for instance, one of the things the Ministry of Infrastructure hopes to do under this project is to do the second lane from Sandals Halcyon right up through to shock. So this is also included on this project, and to improve some of the drainage issues. So that is going to be addressed on the phase 2 of the project. So they've done some review, they've done some work in terms of some of the things they should have done in phase 1, and they are looking to address some of the issues.
I think that is good news, because I was just getting another comment that says, my main concern is in terms of acquiring at least 10 to 15 feet of additional breadth of road, bearing in mind the closeness of houses and commercial spaces. And it may be a challenge in some areas, because there are some areas where people have constructed so close to the existing roadway. In terms of land acquisition and ensuring that there is enough space to accommodate all the way up to Grosley, where are we? Would we have to acquire, or did the appraisal come through to say that what exists currently suffices?
Well, just last week we had a discussion at the Ministry of Infrastructure. I was there for a meeting about issues relating to acquisition for the project. There will be some acquisition costs. They're included in the total cost of the project. So the total project cost includes the cost for design as well as construction, and includes acquisition costs, an estimate of course for acquisition, because you could never tell how much acquisition costs are really going to be. So there would be some acquisition that has to take place, the extent of which, I cannot fully say from where I'm sitting here how much acquisition is going to happen. We suspect it's going to be significant, but sometimes when we think about it, and it may not be as much as people anticipate it would be. In terms of value, it may be, but in terms of the extent of parcels that must be acquired, it probably might not be as much as people anticipate it is. Nevertheless, there has been some anticipation during the appraisal process, and there's an amount that's included in the project to support acquisition.
Indeed, but the fact that you referenced the Sandals area moving up to the Shock roundabout, I think that is welcome news, because this has been a problem. There's a bottleneck in that area, and sometimes you want to believe that there's an accident or something is happening, but it is just that once you have to go back into a single lane in that area, then it causes the traffic to back up. You would appreciate and understand that persons who use that road every day would have their own ideas as to what should be done and how it should be done. And so we are getting a lot of recommendations and comments on the road. In fact, someone was saying that he wished he could know the exact timeline for the project so that he can relocate while this while this project is happening, because he's just not willing to go through it a second time, while of course he would appreciate the road at the end of the day. There is another comment that says, I would like to recommend to the consultants, in order to minimize congestion, that they consider tackling the road from Shock to Bardowaj in the first instance, so that traffic can flow better, as opposed to doing the entire highway at once, as was done with the VG to Shock road. And you did indicate that the secondary roads will be tackled first. We would ensure that they are in a much better condition than they are now, and that thereafter would be moving into the implementation of the actual project, which is the highway itself.
Well, the whole idea is to face the project. So you do the secondary roads first. That being done, we work on the junction improvements, and you're not going to work on the 7 junctions at the same time. So we hope that you'd be working at the junctions, sequentially working on junction improvements. Once that has been done, then you look at issues related to the carriageway. So the process is going to be phased. It's not that you're going to be working on the dual carriageway, the junctions, the pedestrian bridges, and the secondary roads all at the same time.
Very, very good news indeed. Someone says, hi JD, one of the concerns I have with the overhead crossing in the first phase of the project was the lack of crossing from VG all the way to Home Depot. Was that taken into consideration in the second phase to avoid such a long span without an overhead crossing? If you are listening, I would tell you that I heard a number of overhead footbridges. 9?
10.
10 overhead footbridges. And if you could just go through them, so that if this individual knows the road, they would have a very good idea as to what the distance between them would be.
Well, the locations are tentatively Marisil, Glass Motors, Eastwinds Junction,
Okay.
Bardowaj, 2 at Bardowaj,
Okay.
Moshi, the Rodney Bay,
Which is a very big problem right now.
Yeah. A lot of pedestrian motor vehicle conflict in that area. Bonte, Grosley, as well as Wyndham. Wyndham, St. James Morgan, I think, St. James Morgan Club.
Okay.
So they're actually not very far apart.
Yeah, they seem to be, the space seemed to be okay. And if you are
I
still
think
viewing,
the location really has to do with the areas where we have a very high volume of pedestrians, a lot of pedestrian motor vehicle conflict. That's where I think the placement is suggesting.
it says so to me as well. But one of the very troubling areas on that road, very dangerous too, you just mentioned, that is just above the Shock Bridge there near the St. James Morgan.
Wyndham,
Yeah, there seem not just pedestrian vehicle conflict, there's vehicle conflict there all the time. I don't know, some of us just can't seem to understand that you do not go across 2 lanes at any point in time. So you would have to, and the same thing happens on the John Compton Highway, just low down near North. I think it's Northwest. That's in that area, where we always take a chance and never know when that chance or that luck would run out. So I think that area, in order to put that crossing here, I think it would do very well, where people would not be running across the road as we see, and even the drivers too would not be tempted, because I assume that just as we have in the first phase, that once you have that overhead crossing, that you would have barriers.
You would have the median barriers.
Yes.
One of the reasons why you have so much conflict at Wyndham is there's actually, you're actually not supposed to turn downwards at the
Yes.
Wyndham. At the Wyndham, you're supposed to turn up
Yes.
and then turn back. So that's one of the reasons. But with the median, that is going to correct that. That is likely to correct that.
Yes, and I assume too, and we spoke about that a little earlier, with the improvement of the junctions, because a driver would say to you, when I drive up there, it is a headache to find a spot to turn, particularly if I have tourists or if, you know, so you're sending me up there because I'm not supposed to be going across two northbound lanes, but at what junction? Where is the roundabout? Where exactly should I turn? Do I go all the way up to the Corinth Junction? When I get there, what do I do? Do I go all the way up? So I think alongside the improvements of our junctions, we may see a change in attitude, hopefully, although the VG roundabout is right there, and lower down there are options as well, but people still tend to move across in that area. Someone is asking as well, if I could just get this message. Can we go over the financing arrangement? Again, I would very much love to know what is the total cost of the project, and please ask the Permanent Secretary whether the rehabilitation of the secondary roads would be included in that cost, or whether we are speaking simply about the cost of extending from Shock all the way up to Grizzly. So in terms of the project cost?
Okay, so the project is called the Shock Bay to Grosley and Secondary Roads Improvement Project. So the total project cost is approximately 150 million, and that included in that cost is the cost associated with rehabilitation and widening in some cases of some of the secondary roads. So the answer to that is yes. The QAT fund is financing just about 12 million, 11.9 million US.
Okay.
The OFID, the OPEC Fund for International Development, is financing 18 million US. The balance is going to be secured from another multilateral, bilateral or donor agency in short order.
Indeed, and I'm already beginning to get pressure to open the phone lines. We will take a commercial break, and when we come back, we'll be going straight to the phone lines. So the telephone number will be on the screen, so you can call in with your questions. You may have comments that you may want to make. I still have a number of messages that we will try to go through before the end of the program. I always knew that no matter what projects we spoke about, and it doesn't matter how important the water is, especially because the people of Dennery North in particular have been suffering for quite some time, that your attention would, you know, be diverted solely to the Shock Bay Grizzly Road. And I know that your concerns are genuine and you have some concerns, so we'll be giving you an opportunity to call in when we come back. So stay tuned, we'll be right back after this commercial break. Welcome back to In Touch. I'm your host, Jadia Japie-Emmanuel, and my guest this evening is Mrs. Tracy Polius. She's a Permanent Secretary in the Ministry of Planning and National Development. Our phone lines are now open, and you can call in with your questions or your comments. The telephone number will be up on the screen. I just want you to know that the mobile number on your screen is for WhatsApp messages only. I note that I'm getting so many calls on my mobile phone. There is no connectivity between the two, and so you would have to call in to the telephone number on your screen. That is a fixed line. Good night, you're on the air.
Good night, Mrs. Emmanuel. Good night to your guest.
Good night.
I have been following the discussion, and even before the program tonight, I did read the press release. I did see the photos of the signing ceremony and so on. And I must say that it is something that I am very proud of, especially for the water problem, which is going to finally come to an end for the people of Dennery.
Yes.
I know that a lot of persons, when they have the resource available to them, so you know, they don't have a problem with the water and all of that, it's kind of difficult to identify with the plight of the people of the valley and so on. And even for Vieux Fort, I have spent some time in Vieux Fort, and I can tell you, I know of my family there and so on who have that problem. So I am very happy that finally, and even on the news, I saw how excited some of the residents,
Yes.
they looked and they're so enthusiastic and so on. And it's not even, sunk in the district rep and that's all, although they are, but it's finally, there's hope. Finally, something is being done for them. So I wanted to say that I'm very proud of that project. In terms of the shock highway and so on, it would take um, a, a, a fund, or it would take some entity who has confidence in the the, the economy of St. Lucia and so on to actually invest in our country.
Yes, and such a huge
I
amount too.
Right. We have had persons who are asking, where is the investment? What are we doing? What is the investment coming into this country? What is going on and that sort of thing. And I was happy that your guest, and I did not even know that such a ministry existed. I learned something new tonight. I wanted to see that it is something that it is not just the highway that we have to look at, but the depths and so on that it goes through. The Ministry of Foreign Affairs, I would assume, would have been involved in it at some point. The Ministry of Infrastructure, we have planning, all of the ministries and so on. Yes, it will be inconvenience for persons who commute that road every day, but in terms of development for our country and so on, I am very appalled sometimes that when we started developing our country, that the future was not thought of.
Yeah.
And I am happy that something is being done about it and that investment is returning to our country. Thank you very much.
Indeed. Thank you for your contribution. 4527347 is the number to dial. And I can tell you, caller, on the point you made about people not identifying, it does not stand simply for people who live far away, because I'm from the community of Grace and we do not have a water problem there at all. So even for people who are just about 5-10 minutes away from Vieux Fort, it may sometimes be difficult for them to even understand what happens in Vieux Fort. Good night, you're on the air.
Hello, good evening.
Hi, good evening.
Yes, sorry, I really joined the program very, very late.
Mm-hmm.
So I understand you're talking about the road project that's supposed to be happening on the Catchers Rosary Highway.
Yes.
What I would like to get an idea on is the secondary roads,
Yes.
especially roads like Nobe, well, particularly the Nobe road, back road, because
Nobe.
that road is very narrow and some parts are really, really bad.
Okay.
So I just wanted to get a sense of what are they going to be doing, especially in the back roads, particularly that Nobe one there,
Okay.
and also the one where the bridge is at Bois-de-Wange there, where the bypass road was. That general area, that road too is in bad condition. And then you're also looking at back roads like Balata. All these back roads, when there's traffic jams, are they specifically going to be doing really good upgrades to those roads? Because it makes no sense to have a back road or a secondary road to help alleviate traffic, and then when you go on these roads, I mean, it takes you so much time that it's really almost defeating the purpose, you know?
Yeah.
So that's what I want to find out. And the last thing is, I heard about the footbridges. I just wanted to find out whether any considerations were given for like tunnels. So instead of going up, because I understand that especially in the VG area, that's why they couldn't have those footbridges, because of the proximity of the airport. What about if they were able to make maybe a couple of tunnels at VG so that people could just walk under rather than walk over? Thanks very much.
Sure. Thank you so much for your contribution. He wanted some more information on the secondary roads.
Well, in some cases, the secondary roads are slated to be rehabilitated.
Mm-hmm.
In some cases, that would include design to widen the roads to accommodate fully two-lane traffic. So in some cases, they are going to be widened, and in all the cases, they are going to be rehabilitated to ensure that they are in better condition to ensure smooth commute into Castries. In terms of the question regarding the tunnel, like I said initially, when the project was initially designed, it was a much more complex project, but cost is also one of the is usually one of the major driving forces behind what is actually implemented at the end of the day. So I would imagine, I don't know if tunnels were ever considered for VG, but I would imagine that cost is one of the major factors in influencing what we actually implement.
Good night, caller. You on the air? Hello, good night.
Yeah, good night.
Hi, good night.
Yeah, when you had an interruption there when you asked a question about the Morgan Bay Hill.
Uh-huh.
I didn't hear the answer.
Oh, you didn't understand very clearly.
No. They had a advertisement came on right when you asked the question about
Okay.
the hill, what you would do if there's a roundabout or whatnot.
Okay, sure. I will allow, is this the extent of your contribution?
Yeah, instead of
Okay, sure. I'll allow the Permanent Secretary to repeat. He wanted to get an idea as to what exactly will be happening in the...
At Wyndham?
Yes.
There's going to be construction of a footbridge at Wyndham. But what I was saying, part of the reason why usually there's some conflict at Wyndham is because drivers are not supposed to, turning out of Wyndham, you're not supposed to turn down. You're supposed to drive up the lane
and find wherever somewhere to turn.
And then turn down. But people traverse 2 lanes of traffic and try to turn down
which is
into
illegal.
the third lane, which is illegal. So that is the problem. So I was saying that the median would help with that, because if you're having 2-lane, 2-way, then you can't cross down. You have to go up.
Yes.
And hopefully, well, not hopefully, the plan is to have that Marisol Junction, that Grand Riviere Junction improve. So you would then have somewhere to turn and go down.
I hope this answers it for you, caller. Good night, you on the air?
Hi, good night, Julia. Good night to your guest.
Good night.
Good night.
Julia, this great party of ours and who has formed the government is doing so much in this country. When are you going to name something after Mr. Hunt or Kenny Anthony, the Kenny Anthony Highway, the Julian Hunt something?
Well, I can tell
Everything
you,
has been named.
the Prime Minister has said, the Prime Minister, Honorable Dr. Kennedy Anthony, has said that he wishes that nothing be named after him. He says this all of the time. He wants to be remembered in the hearts and minds of the people of St. Lucia, and this is his wish. And so I would
let's
imagine
name
that
something after Mr. Pierre. Let's do something.
Yes, well, we can go that way, but we have to respect the Prime Minister's wish, at least for as long as he's alive. These things change when people move on.
Yes, I just want to call to thank the government and the technocrats, and the real technocrats on the ground, like the PS that was actually making it happen. Just to thank them for actually making things happen in the country. Thank you very much.
Yeah, sure. Thank you for that contribution. Very, very good contribution, because most times we focus on the ministers and then we forget that there are people working behind the scenes, especially within the public service. Good night, you on the air?
Hello, good night.
Hello, good night.
JDL.
Yes, sir.
I was listening to you a couple Mondays back. You are the Minister of Agriculture.
Yes.
And you all do mention well, the Jetty Poire.
Yes.
And the canal start already.
Yes.
That's what you see.
Yes.
And I think 2 days back, I go down there and I saw nothing happening down there. I don't know where they start.
Well, I went to, and although it is taking me off my discussion for tonight, I did visit the Poale Bay with the Prime Minister on Wednesday last week, and I noticed that one of the abutments were already down. And I know that it is a more technical and complex project than we would think, and just as we're discussing with our project here, there's a lot that happens behind the scenes. You would have to do your testing, your monitoring, and so on and so forth before you actually begin to see the bricks and the mortar on the ground. But I know it has already been demarcated, and I did notice that there was a concrete platform that was constructed at the Poile area in preparation for that. I have not been to Savans Bay, so I cannot speak to that. Somebody from the ministry would have to speak to that one.
Canals has
Next question. Okay, the falling.
Yes.
I hope you all put something in place for the Wasco 14 inch pipe that's going up there, because that pipe weak.
Are you there, caller?
Yeah, it's still there.
Yeah.
The Wasco falling pipe from Shock to Gozile. That pipe weak below the ground. So when that falling come, I hope the Prime Minister put something in place.
A very important point. PS, in terms of our utilities and ensuring that what we do it for the future, not just for now. A lot of people have been crying and bawling about roads being dug up, right after they constructed and so on and so forth. I'm hoping, as was done with the very first phase, that we would get all of these things out of the way from very early.
Typically, the Ministry of Infrastructure will work with the utility companies in terms of relocating of infrastructure, or it's necessary, an upgrade of infrastructure. I don't know if you recall, but for instance, one of the major causes of delay in one of the projects that we had back in 2000, I think it must be in the early 2000 period, was due to relocation. So typically the relocation of utilities, the Ministry of Infrastructure works with the utility firms in so doing, and there is usually an allocation within the project to accommodate such. I just wanted to refer back to Canals, Jadia. The caller just mentioned that he has not seen any work at Canals. I wanted to say that the contractor has indeed mobilized for Canals. I was down in Vieux-Fort only last Sunday.
Oh, that for sure is happening. I think he was referring to a Ministry of Agriculture project, which is the construction of jetties in the Savans Bay area. And as I said to him, I can speak to Poile because we visited there with the Prime Minister, and we have some photographs on Facebook to show that. But I really cannot speak on the Savans Bay, although I pass this area very often. I have not really stopped to verify that the works are happening. We have another caller. You on the air?
Yeah, I would like to find out if you all have something in place for minibus drivers, the males in the...
You want a special road? Caller, you there?
Yeah.
So you want a special road for the minibus drivers?
No, if you will allow them to traverse that route instead of doing the back roads and whatnot.
Are you a minibus driver?
Yes, I am.
Okay, and you're concerned about the time?
Yeah.
Yeah, indeed, and I can imagine what it would be like for you already. But Madam Permanent Secretary, special consideration for minibus drivers?
I'm not sure that we can have special consideration for minibus drivers. I mean, in the context where you plying a route, it would mean that there will be some inconvenience, especially to the motoring public. And I can understand the concerns by minibus drivers because that is the means by which they
I
gain
am
their
already
income.
hearing the arguments, fuel and time. But caller, what I can say to you, perhaps you could raise your concerns with your minibus association, and perhaps there can be dialogue between the Ministry of Infrastructure and your association as to the way forward.
Okay.
Yeah, sure. Thank you so much for calling. And I didn't think of it before, but I am already hearing the arguments being proposed, and the taxi drivers will soon be coming to the fore because, a lot of our hotels are located up there as well. Thank you for staying in touch. You're on the air.
I'm just wondering about the impact of the spending on the debt to GDP ratio for St. Lucia.
Sure. Thank you very much for your question and your concern. Impact on debt to GDP ratio?
There would be an impact in terms of debt to, on the debt. What we, in terms of looking at the debt to GDP ratio, when the government of St. Lucia borrows, so for instance, this project is going to be is $150 million. You don't, all of it does not hit the debt at the same time. It hits the debt as it's disbursed. Okay. And so there are two components to the debt to GDP. There's a GDP component, there's a growth component. So we hope that over time, what you would see is that this project advances economic opportunity, so that you have an impact in terms of on the growth side, so that you would see your GDP increasing. So there would be a positive impact in terms of debt to GDP ratio. I think this represents about the total probably now about 4% of GDP. 4 was it 16? Yeah, just a little under 4% of GDP, so 3 point something percent of GDP. But it does not hit the all the debt, the debt at one time. So over the 3 to 4 years in terms of implementation, that's when you're going to see the impact over a course of 3 years rather than in a single
Indeed,
cycle.
I would imagine that these considerations would be for all projects and financing opportunities that your ministry would be involved in, that
For
you would
all
have
projects.
to, engage in that kind of discussion and calculating what the impact would be now and, of course, in the future as well.
Yeah, and one of the considerations, certainly in terms of managing debt management, is that you want to invest in growth enhancing projects, in projects that are going to allow for the expansion of economic opportunities so that you would see growth in the future. And this is one such project. So when you're looking at the return on your investment, these are some of the factors you consider, so that you want, if you are going to incur debt, that the debt is really going to be productive. And certainly in the case of a project like that, in terms of reducing debt weight loss to the economy, reducing the cost, certainly this is a project with a positive return. So that is how you look at it in terms of the dynamics of the debt, not in terms, strictly in terms of how it increases the debt, but is it going to allow for expansion of economic opportunity and productive capacity?
And then when we begin to have this discussion, we will begin to understand why roads are built in certain areas before other areas, and why government would invest in this area versus that area, and so on. There seems to have been a break as we discuss some of the points, because I am getting some questions and comments to repeat some information. Someone is saying the critical question was in relation to the location of the roundabouts. There was a break during your response. We'll get to that, but first we will take this call. Thank you for staying in touch. You're on the air.
Hello, good night, JD.
Hi, good night.
I would like to know whether the government pays back to NIS when they borrow money from them.
Could you say that again?
I would like to know whether the government pays back NIS. For example, I've known they have taken monies to build this center in whatever it is. And well, I just wanted to know whether when they borrow money from NIC, whether they pay them back.
Well, I guess that would be a question for the Prime Minister, because I'm really not sure. I do not know if the Permanent Secretary will be in a position to comment on, but I know once government borrows, government has to pay. But if there are any specific concerns, I guess that would be a matter for the Minister for Finance or the Director or Permanent Secretary in the Ministry of Finance.
No, what I could say is that the government has borrowed on occasion from the National Insurance Company, and the government pays back. So, for instance, we have a number of facilities that we've had bolt arrangements with for NIC, some fire stations and the like, and those have been repaid.
Before 2006.
Yeah. So, I mean, the short answer to this question is yes. The
grant is grant and borrow is borrow. It doesn't matter where you're borrowing it from. If I would expect that you would have to pay back. Colin, do you have any specific issue or concern as it relates to NIC and government arrangements?
Yes.
Sure, you could go ahead.
Well, you know, I heard recently they had to go and get some more money from NIC for that building near the electricity services. Some time ago, right?
Building near the electricity services?
I thought, they had to.
Or the finance center to the back?
Yes. I think from NIS they got that money. So I was just wondering whether when they pay back, because I know that's money that is to pay our pensioners for the future. So I know if we borrow and don't pay back, it means it's going to affect our pensioners.
I understand your concern.
And I know our pensioners have not been getting any increases.
I understand your concern.
But that they get loans are going out, but they're not getting the benefit. Like, you know, the monies are being borrowed. The government controls NIS to a certain extent. Like when I say they control it, they appoint the board.
I understand what you're saying.
If the board, if they want a loan and the board don't approve, they can always put another board to approve of their loans, and if they don't want to pay, they may not pay back.
Well,
I don't know. That's
the thing about government borrowing is that it doesn't happen in a boardroom. So once you're speaking about borrowing, there would have to be approval to borrow. Most times it would have to go to the House of Assembly. There are specific terms and arrangements for borrowing funds, not just from banks but other agencies as well. But the permanent secretary did indicate that the terms and conditions, the agreements are usually met.
Okay, well, I'll hope.
But it's a genuine concern.
Yeah,
I understand.
concern,
I understand.
As I
Sure.
said, they're the ones who put the board there, so they have some form of control too. So they may not want, if they do wish to pay, they may not pay back, whatever it is. Thank you
Sure.
very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much for that concern and your comment. The junctions. Someone wanted us to repeat which junctions will be upgraded because there was a break during your response.
Okay, so there'll be upgrading of 7 junctions. Marisol, Moshi, Glass Motors, Bois d'Orange, Rodney Bay, Bonte, and Grosile.
Okay. Yeah, I'm getting a response. So apparently the person would have gotten that information. We probably can take just about one more call for 527347. If you have any questions or comments that you'd want to make on our topic just before we end our program, 4527347 is the number to dial. And just as I predicted, I said that once you begin to have, special groups and of road users beginning to represent their interests, you would hear questions and comments coming from others as well. And I'm just getting a note to say that I'm a taxi driver, and already it is a hassle to get up to Sandals at certain points in time. Can you imagine what the drive would be like for someone who's coming in through Vieux Fort and would have to take back roads all along the way? We do it now, there is no congestion, and it's a headache. Imagine now all road users using that very same road. I would suggest that something would be put in place to accommodate the taxi drivers. And again, I would advise that there be some discussion with the Ministry of Infrastructure. Good night, caller, you on there?
Yes, good evening. I just like to clarify, are all the secondary roads going to be completed before the project is going to take place? Because usually what happens is that it's kind of done at the same time, so you find that those traffic problems really multiply. So I just want to know, are they going to fully complete renovations and fixing of the secondary bypass roads before the project starts? Thanks.
Sure, and the Permanent Secretary indicated earlier that the secondary roads will be constructed first, and so that it is going to happen in a phased approach. You want to ensure that the secondary roads are done so that when you are diverting traffic, you're not creating an unnecessary headache. Someone says, do you know what concerns me? While all these plans are on the Shock Grizzly improvement, there are still developments going on. Is this a sign of miscommunication between key agencies in the public service? And I know that we have some development happening along the Shock Grizzly highway already. Would these things be considered as approval will be granted? I know that usually there are many concerns being raised about the communication between government agencies and departments, that the DCA doesn't know what this one is doing and this one is operating within its terms without giving consideration for the broader framework. So do we have discussion going on internally to ensure that the left hand knows what the right hand is planning so that there is coordination?
We have to remember that the northern corridor of the island is a very popular area. It's where the high value is, and most people want to relocate their businesses and their homes. A lot of people want to live there. And so the interest and the demand for land in that area is very high. This is a project that has been very much in circulation, not just today, but comments, like we said, for many years. Planning started many years before the 2006 and 2007 implementation of the first phase. So I would say that in terms of the government service, most of the stakeholders would be aware of the plans for implementation of such a project.
Okay, indeed. We're going to wrap up our program. I'm still receiving messages, and most of them seem to be comments on the project itself. I want to let you know that the project brief, and that was introduced at the signing ceremony in the office of the Prime Minister just about a week ago. The entire project overview will be made available and it will be circulated. Certainly it will be passed on to GIS so that it can be placed on the Government of St. Lucia's website. Components of it are already available on the official Facebook page, which is Press Secretary to the Prime Minister St. Lucia. And if you send me a message via WhatsApp or our email, which is intouchwithjadia@gmail.com, I can always forward it to you so that you can get a better idea as to what exactly is in that project. The timelines are given as well, not necessarily in terms of dates, but what we expect to happen. And so you can remain in touch and know what exactly is happening. And of course, it will give you an opportunity to question as you see things happening along the way. Just before we close the program, I would like to give you an opportunity for your closing remarks. But first, I want to thank you for being on the program tonight. Clearly, this is an issue that needed a little bit more discussion so that members of the public could get a sense as to what the plans are and where exactly we are going with this project. So thank you so much for sharing with us tonight, not just this one, but the water supply redevelopment project is a very, very important project. And as our first caller said, unless it impacts you personally, sometimes you do not get a true sense as to how valuable it is and how it can change lives. And so I know the parliamentary rep for Dennery North, this project is close to his heart. And I think I heard him say some time ago that his political future sat on this project because this is one of the promises that meant so much to him. And so I believe he's a very happy man tonight to see that progress is being made. And he'll be knocking on your door for sure to be asking what exactly is happening now, how come we're not seeing this and that. This is Sean Edward for you. So thank you for being on the program, and I just want to give you an opportunity for your closing remarks.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I was very happy to share some of the work that we're doing in the Department of Planning on the project side. We're also doing a lot of work on the reform and development planning as well, and we'd be happy to share that with you. It would also be useful, I think, for once we start implementation on some of our very important projects, for you to maybe have a sit down with some of the implementers themselves, so that you could really get a sense of some of the issues that they're addressing, some of the problems that we come across, because no matter how much you plan, issues and problems arise during the course of implementation, and you'd give us an opportunity to, the implementers, an opportunity to dialogue and converse with the nation about those and help troubleshoot and, you know, keep people informed about the progress of the projects that we're implementing. So I was very happy to be here tonight. Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much, and for that suggestion. It means that I would have to remain in close contact with you so that we can monitor and that we can get the actual movers and shakers, the people who will be making things happen on the ground, to appear on the program to update our viewers. As always, I want to thank you. The show is not possible without you, of course. Thank you for tuning in to another edition of In Touch. Next week, Monday, fortunately for me, unfortunately for some of us, is a holiday, and so we will not be on the program, but you could join us the following Monday for another edition of In Touch. I thank you as always for your calls, for your messages, and those of you who just viewed the program, it really means a lot. Again, have yourself a safe and enjoyable weekend, and into next week as well. We'll be back with another edition of In Touch soon enough.